she actually has the nerve to say that she was run out of Hollywood. This person...
And with $100 million in her pocket.
$450 million, according to Forbes. That's a low estimate.
Everyone knew that is the part that should stop you. Not that Ellen DeGeneres was accused of running a brutal workplace, because that broke in 2020 and you have heard it. The question nobody has ever answered is why hundreds of people in Hollywood watched it happen for 2 decades and said nothing. Then, in September of 2024, Rob Schneider sat down with a microphone in front of him and finally answered it out loud. What he described was not a rumor about one woman. It was the reason an entire industry stayed quiet, and that reason is still standing today. The kindness empire. To understand why that landed, you have to remember the size of the thing he was talking about. When the Ellen DeGeneres show premiered in 2003, daytime television was a fairly grim place. Ellen arrived with something else. She danced through the audience. She gave cars to families who needed them. She sent people on trips they could never have afforded. And she closed every episode with 3 words that became a brand, a bumper sticker, and eventually an entire personality. Be kind to one another. It worked. It worked for 19 seasons.
Ellen's fine. She can sit on her pile of money.
I hope you like your money, because that's why I broke up with you. Do you like sitting on your piles of cash? Because guess what? It gets you exactly where you are. And by the way, baby, it's what you wanted then, and I hope you're liking it now.
The show collected daytime Emmys by the armful and ran in syndication all over the world. For millions of households, she was not a talk show host. She was the decent, steady presence you left on in the background while you folded laundry. And that image was not built out of nothing. She had earned real goodwill. In 1997, she came out publicly on her own sitcom, in an era when that could end a career, and for a while, it very nearly did. She lost the show. She spent years in the wilderness before daytime brought her back. That history is real. The affection people felt for her was real too. But hundreds of people worked on that program over 19 years. And a lot of them would eventually describe an experience that had almost nothing in common with what the camera was pointed at. The unwritten rules. Here is why it took so long to surface. It was never one enormous scandal. It was 100 small ones. Production assistants, stagehands, technicians, the people who arrive at 5 in the morning and leave after the lights are off. According to accounts that eventually reached BuzzFeed News, some of them were told by their direct managers not to speak to DeGeneres if they passed her around the office. Do not approach. Do not start a conversation.
It was a family to me. We had so much fun together at that show. We laughed all the time. We played games all the time.
In the retelling, that instruction hardened into something starker, a rule that nobody was permitted to look her in the eye. That version traveled fastest and stuck hardest, and it needs a caution. It did not originate in the reporting. It came out of a viral social media thread and an Australian television producer describing what he was told by her team before a 2013 appearance. DeGeneres addressed it directly on a staff call in August of 2020 and called it insane. She said she had no idea where it started and that it simply was not true. What is better documented is the atmosphere underneath it. Staff described a workplace where a small mistake felt career-sized, where you checked who was in the corridor before you walked down it, where the gap between how the guests were treated and how the crew were treated was impossible to miss, because visiting stars got warmth and gifts, and the people building the set operated under a completely different set of rules. And there was a structure that made all of it possible. The senior executive producers ran the day-to-day operation. Complaints went to them. Problems stopped with them. Whatever was happening on that floor, there was an entire management layer sitting between it and the woman whose name was on the building. When everything stopped, for 17 years, that arrangement held. It took a global shutdown to crack it. In the spring of 2020, production across Los Angeles simply stopped. Crews went home. And what happened next felt less like an emergency to the people who had given years to this particular show, and more like an answer to a question they had never wanted to ask. Regular crew were left waiting with very little word about pay or whether they still had jobs. Meanwhile, the show kept broadcasting, produced out of DeGeneres' own home.
There are a lot of things I want to talk about. I've been looking forward to addressing it all directly, and unfortunately, talking directly to people has been illegal for 6 months, so I have a virtual audience here instead. Here you all are.
Using an outside tech crew, rather than the union people who had been doing that work for years. You can absorb a lot of small indignities when you believe the institution values you. What you cannot absorb is evidence that it does not. If you are finding this useful, take a second to subscribe, because we go through these Hollywood stories properly rather than just repeating whatever went viral that week. It genuinely helps the channel. The July Report. In July of 2020, BuzzFeed News published the investigation that broke it open. 1 current and 10 former employees, most of them speaking anonymously, describing what it was actually like inside. Sit with one of those accounts for a second. Somebody in that group said they were fired after taking bereavement days to attend a family funeral. Think about the shape of that week. You get the call, you make the arrangements, and somewhere in there you have the other conversation. The one where you explain to a manager why you will not be at a 5 a.m. call time on a show whose entire brand is kindness. Then you go, then you come back, and then you are gone. We do not know that person's name. We do not know their job title. We do not know their face. They spoke anonymously, and years later, they are still anonymous. And that is not a gap in the story. That is the story. That is what it costs to say anything at all when the person you are describing is beloved by 4 million households a day. Others described being let go after medical leave. Others described racist comments. Across the accounts, the same understanding kept surfacing, which is that raising a concern and volunteering to be replaced were the same act. A second wave of reporting followed, and it escalated. Allegations of sexual misconduct and inappropriate behavior were made against senior producers. Some of the accused pushed back hard through their attorneys, and one lawyer called the reporting deeply flawed. Warner Brothers opened a formal internal investigation. By August, 3 top producers had exited. When the show returned that autumn for its 18th season, DeGeneres opened with a direct on-air apology, taking responsibility for what had happened on a set with her name on it. Here is the part people get wrong about what the investigation found. Warner Brothers said not every allegation was corroborated. It also said it was disappointed by findings that pointed to real deficiencies in the day-to-day management of the show. Not a vindication, not a conviction. A company confirming that something had gone meaningfully wrong. The apology did not land the way her team hoped. And by then, the staff accounts were only half of the problem, because the other half had been sitting on the internet the whole time.
When was your birthday?
It was October 4th.
October 4th. You turned 30.
I did.
And how was the party? I wasn't invited.
Actually, no, that's not the truth, Ellen. You were invited.
The couch moments. A talk show interview is a negotiated performance. The guest brings an anecdote. The host sets it up. Everybody wins, and the movie gets promoted. It only becomes interesting when somebody declines to perform. November 2019. Dakota Johnson is on the couch, and Ellen teases her about not being invited to her 30th birthday party. Johnson does not laugh it off. She says calmly that this is not true. Ellen was invited. Ellen did not come. Then she asks the producers to confirm it, and they do. It lasts about 15 seconds. It goes everywhere. That clip works like a key in a lock. People start going back through the archive, and the one that stops them cold is from 2008. Mariah Carey is a guest. Pregnancy rumors are circulating, and Carey does not want to discuss it. So a bottle of champagne comes out, and she is invited to toast to not being pregnant. Carey protests that this is peer pressure. She raises the glass, mimes a sip, and the host announces to the audience that she is expecting. 12 years later, Carey told Vulture she had been extremely uncomfortable in that moment and had struggled with the aftermath. She explained why she had not been ready to tell anyone. She had already suffered a miscarriage. She went on to miscarry that pregnancy as well, shortly after the interview aired. Other segments resurfaced beside it, jokes about Sofia Vergara's accent. Taylor Swift pushed about her dating life in front of a studio audience while visibly asking to move on. Individually, television. Collectively, a pattern. And specifically a pattern where the discomfort of the guest was the mechanism of the entertainment. And the guest could not object, because objecting on camera makes you look difficult. Looking difficult costs an actor far more than 15 seconds of embarrassment ever will, which is exactly why nobody with a career said anything.
Ellen would look at Ed and she would laugh, because I was hoping she was going to say, Ed, you can't be yelling at crew this way. You can't be yelling at people this way. She laughed and she said, every production needs their dog.
Breaking the code. Here is what people outside the industry never quite believe. All of it was public. The clips, the reporting, the apology, the cancellation 2 years later, and still, almost no working comedian would say a word on the record. The reason is arithmetic. For decades, daytime hosts controlled access. They decided whose film got a promotional slot, whose tour got mentioned, whose face landed in front of 4 million households on a Tuesday afternoon. Criticize one publicly and you do not get a formal ban. You just stop getting booked everywhere, and nobody ever explains why. The silence was not loyalty, it was self-preservation. Which brings us back to that studio in September of 2024. Schneider is there promoting a book. He is a former Saturday Night Live cast member with 3 decades of touring behind him, and his living does not depend on daytime bookings. Megyn Kelly raises the promotional material for the new Netflix special, in which DeGeneres frames her own story around having been effectively thrown out of the industry. And they go straight at it. Kelly's position is blunt. You have not been canceled if Netflix is airing your special. She notes that DeGeneres was paid around $20 million for the previous one, and expresses considerable confidence that she is doing fine. Hold that figure carefully, because it gets garbled constantly. The $20 million Kelly cited was for the earlier special, not the 2024 one, and the argument was never really about the number anyway. The humility problem. Schneider's own contribution is quieter, and it is much harder to wave away. He says he believes in second chances. He is a comedian who has absorbed his own share of public criticism, and he is not arguing for anybody's permanent exile. What he says is that he does not sense any humility in how this has been handled. That word carries the whole thing. Because the complaint was never that Ellen DeGeneres was insufficiently nice. The complaint was that people earning $40,000 a year said they lost their jobs over a funeral, that the person at the top of a 19-year operation had built a public identity out of kindness, while
Ellen is a nasty person. And all these staffers started to come out, not for nothing, but I know a guy, I know him very well, whose sister worked for her, who said you were not allowed to make eye contact with Ellen in the halls of that show.
according to a large number of the people underneath her, the actual experience of working there was governed by fear. And Schneider's read is that the response never went anywhere near those specific people, not the production assistants, not the crew. He also pointed at the double standard around it, and that is the part that carried the segment beyond its usual audience. A performer with no institutional protection makes one mistake and is finished by Friday. Somebody generating hundreds of millions in revenue can operate under sustained allegations for years while the machinery closes ranks. That is not a claim about one woman's character. It is a claim about who the business decides is worth protecting. And the special that came out that same month made his case better than he did. For your approval, September 2024, Netflix releases the stand-up special, billed as a farewell. In it, DeGeneres tells the audience she got kicked out of show business for being mean. It is delivered as a joke and it gets a laugh. It is also, functionally, her closing argument. The problem is the room she is making it in. She is on a stage, in front of a sold-out crowd, being filmed for one of the largest streaming platforms on the planet. The set spends real time on her property, her gardening, her chickens, and how hard it was to lose her position. For an audience of people who have actually been fired and got no farewell tour, the disconnect is not subtle. Former staff pushed back immediately, and their point was simple. The show did not end because some people online decided she was mean. It ended after an investigation, after senior producers exited, after a specific set of allegations about how a workplace was run. Reduce all of that to being mean, and you have not apologized. You have edited. So the special did not function as a reset, and it raises a harder question than anything in it, which is how an operation like that survives 19 years in the first place.
It's just me. I own 100% of my own show and stock. I take advertisements. They don't control what I say. And if they tried to, I would fire them. So it's just a totally different animal. There are no sacred cows. I can say how I actually feel about any subject, and I do.
The sacred cow. Kelly used a phrase in that episode that explains those 19 years better than any individual allegation does. Sacred cows. The idea is simple, and it is not unique to one network. When a production generates enough money and enough prestige, the ordinary rules stop applying to the person at the center of it. Not because anybody signs off on that, because every incentive in the building points the same direction. The distributor is making a fortune in syndication. The advertisers are happy. The parent company has a reliable asset. The agencies want their clients on that couch. The press wants access. And a production assistant with a complaint is the least powerful person in any room they will ever stand in, who also understands perfectly well what going to a reporter costs. The goodwill compounded it. Her history genuinely was groundbreaking. And that history could be deployed gently and effectively whenever an unflattering story started to form. Look at the giveaways. Look at 1997. Look at what she means to people. None of that is a conspiracy. It is what an institution does when protecting somebody is profitable and examining them is not, which leaves one thing unexplained. If the arrangement was that strong and it held for 17 years, what broke it? What actually changed? Not a conscience, not a reform. The gate stopped working. For most of television history, a crew member with a story had exactly one route to the public, and that route ran through outlets that needed continued access to the show they were complaining about. A reporter could take the call. Their editor still had to weigh it against the bookings that relationship supplied. So the story went into a drawer, and the person who told it went back to work, and nothing happened. That loop stayed closed for decades, and it was not closed by villainy. It was closed by everyone involved acting in their own obvious interest. Then it opened. Independent reporters, social platforms, comment channels, anonymous threads. A former employee could reach an enormous audience without a single editor's permission and without ever attaching their name to it. Notice what that did to the arithmetic. The old system worked because speaking cost you everything and bought you nothing. Remove the cost and you do not get one brave whistleblower. You get 11 people at once because they had all been holding the same thing for years and were only ever waiting for a way to put it down. That is the real story here, and it is much bigger than one host. Schneider was not describing a woman, he was describing a machine. And the only reason he could describe it in September of 2024 is that the machine had already lost the thing that made it work. But it lost that in one specific industry, in one specific decade. And the woman at the center of it had already made her own arrangements.
All people on earth to be feeling sorry for herself, Ellen DeGeneres should not be on the list.
She should at least, but make a real apology and do it.
There's no apology. It's just woe is me. I was run out of Hollywood as she speaks from this grandiose stage on Netflix. Hello, you haven't been canceled if you are doing a Netflix special. She got $20 million for the one before this. I'm sure she's fine.
I'm sure she's fine.
The quiet countryside. In late 2024, following the presidential election that November, DeGeneres and her wife Portia de Rossi left the United States. They had been together since 2004 and married since 2008. They bought a farmhouse in the Cotswolds on 43 acres and started over. It has not been smooth. The first property, Kitesbridge Farm, had flooding problems. By July of 2025, it was listed for around $30 million, while they moved to a modern estate on a hilltop in Oxfordshire, with the pasture and stabling de Rossi's horses require. Then, in late November of 2025, they quietly closed an off-market deal on a $27.4 million estate back in Montecito, bought from the producer Brian Grazer. Sources close to the couple described it as somewhere to spend the winter rather than a permanent return, and said the plan is to split their time. She is 68 now. She has not attempted a television comeback, and there is no sign she intends to. So, the question worth sitting with is not really about her. Do you think Ellen DeGeneres was the villain of this story, or was she the one person the industry was willing to hand over so that nothing else had to change? Because every incentive that protected that show for 19 years is still sitting exactly where it was. Tell me where you land in the comments. Hit the like button if this was worth your time, and subscribe, because there are a lot more of these stories and most of them have never been told properly